Welcome to the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by Inside Texas. I'm Joe Cook. Today I'm joined by our X's and O's expert, Ian Boyd. We're going to talk a little bit about the Alamo Bowl last year, how it affects the Sugar Bowl this year, the matchup between Texas and Washington. And then we'll get into some details about the Texas defense, namely how Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat, who was just named a unanimous All-American, have really stepped up the play for that entire unit. Ian, how are you doing up in the great Midwest today?
Good, a little colder. Got me putting on some wool socks and before we came on. Joe, you've been in the Sugar Bowl, right? Didn't you cover the Texas Georgia game there?
Yes, January 1st, 2019, and it is you're at a pretty high perch where the all 22 film usually is taken from.
You've been in the Alamo Bowl, I'm sure. I've been in the Alamo Bowl in the press box before for the Oregon State game in, was that 2012? I don't know how people feel about the Alamo Bowl in general, but my sense is that the press box in the Alamo Bowl is very popular. Is that right?
It is. It's basically, 50-yard line, midfield, good angle. I don't know if anybody watches Mizzou football. That's a bad angle for TV, but it's a good angle to watch from. Kind of the same place you're looking from, just above the lower concourse. I got to see a lot of this Washington team last year in the Alamo Bowl. We got to see a lot of this same Texas team last year in the Alamo Bowl, and their defense, basically a cast of the same characters, same three wide receivers, Michael Penix at quarterback. A lot of the same guys on that defensive field last year will be there again for the Longhorns. Just basically change out a linebacker and a safety. And we'll talk about the strategy that Texas used last year in order to really keep Michael Penix in check. They scored 27 points, but 7 of those came through the run game, held them to 2 field goals. Of course, they got 2 touchdowns, ended up prevailing over the Longhorns for, I think, an 11-win season. But Ian, what stood out to you about last year's strategy? And let's think of who the defensive back options were really quickly. If I'm going to go off memory. You had Ryan Watts, you had Jaron Thompson, who recorded an interception, Anthony Cook, Jahdae Barron, and I think Deshaun Jameson was your secondary in that game. What do you remember about that strategy that fivesome used last year against Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and the Michael Penix-led passing attack?
Yeah, I do believe Terrence Brooks got in the game late, and
right.
he was very good when he did play. It was locking up Rome Odunze, but I believe Jameson started. They played Washington. They were more respectful of the Washington passing game than I think they were for any other team they played in 2022, save for maybe Alabama, right? Who had Bryce Young. They played. They gave Odunze. He usually had either a safety over the top, like in cover 2, or a safety that was staying inside of him to help the cornerback when the cornerback pressed up on him. They played Jahdae Barron pretty conservatively against the run. Usually, Texas would bring a safety or a nickel near the action to help against the run now and again, but they played with a light box in this game. They played with, there we go. They played with, right here you see the end for nickel. That'd be Jahdae Barron. He played with the slot receiver for most of the game, and he stayed on him to make sure they didn't hit any quick passes. The safety stayed deep. If Odunze was the X, then the strong safety marked by the $sign, would stay deep enough to make sure that he didn't get behind him on a post route or vertical route. Washington is probably the most explosive, dangerous, and vertical passing oriented offense in the country. They live for it. It's basically what Sark would like to be at Texas. They're just taking shots down the field all the time. And Texas's strategy was basically, we're going to make that as hard as we possibly can. And if you can run the ball in our 6-man box, then go for it. And at times they did.
Right. I remember. I can't remember his last name. Wayne got out on a run. I think it was a long 42-yarder. And just trying to think of, that was a game where DeMarvion Overshone wasn't there to help, and so you had Diamante Tucker Dorsey. So your regular Will wasn't in there, and instead you had a guy who's a lot smaller than DeMarvion Overshone, to be honest. And that one run where Texas couldn't really defend the Husky rushing offense with that light box was the difference in the game. It was a 7-point contest. These receivers that they have, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, who's going to be at pretty close to full health as possible, they didn't let them get a whole lot. I don't think any of them had more than 60 yards. I think McMillan may have had a good yards per catch number, but none of them had more than 60 yards. A stat you mention all the time, yards per attempt, it was under 6, correct?
Yeah.
And Jaron Thompson early in the game even made a break on a ball playing, I think maybe that cover 2-ish style you were talking about, made a break and recorded an interception. So the game plan that the Longhorns utilized last year, and that, remember, that not only include Sweat and Murphy kind of as the second team, but it also had Coburn and Ojimo, 2 guys on NFL rosters right now. It worked for the most part, except for one play on a 42-yard run. I don't think there were any long passes. There may have been a couple, but they didn't end up in the end zone. And that's really a key because, like you said, they're an explosive passing attack. When you look at Michael Penix's passing numbers, I have Pro Football Focus pulled up. 70% of those passes don't have play action. They're trusting Penix to wheel it and deal it and trusting those receivers to get open. Even their fourth receiver, I think either a transfer from Michigan or Michigan State, he's capable at doing really well. So this is a game where Texas is going to have to play that light box. And as a result, there may not be as much pressure on the secondary, but, and explain this if you will, there's going to be a lot more pressure on guys like Murphy, Sweat, Anthony Hill, Jalen Ford, even Jet Bush, the edge crew of Barron Sorrell and then Ethan Burke to win their battles so that the Huskies can't chew up yards on the ground and make those safeties have to think again about coming down to help play the run.
So the point about play action is really big because what that means is that you use play action so that you can protect your quarterback, and it forces the defensive line to hesitate because they're not going to race up field and get the quarterback if they think a run is coming. Right?
It forces everybody to hesitate.
And it also, it creates hesitation from the linebackers, if not just outright sucking them in. So then you isolate your vertical receivers on the corner, on the safety. The quarterback just reads the alignment of the safety, and then he's throwing the ball. And he's got a lot of time to do it. That's how Texas prefers to do it. That's how most teams take their shots. The fact that Washington isn't doing that is illustrative of just like how advanced Penix is. And he is a 6th-year senior. And how much they trust their offensive line. Because that means that to hold the linebackers, they're getting 4 or 5 receivers out every time. And then they're not taking shots behind a wall of protection on a simple read. They're taking their shots on plays where they're really creating all kinds of stress down the field. They're attacking linebackers. They're attacking non-traditional coverage defenders with their shots. It's like 2019 LSU. The reason more teams don't do this is because it's really freaking hard to do it. Now, they can still run the ball from those spread sets, which puts a lot of pressure on the box. And arguably to defend it properly, you either need to do what Texas did last year and just have your safeties and your nickel just be full time. We are pass guys. We're not worried about the run today. That's like item 3 on our grocery list, right? You can do it that way, or you can even downsize and play in dime. Either way, you're putting a lot on your front to affect the quarterback and to hold up against the run when they do run. Because Dylan Johnson, the Washington running back, ran for over 1,000 yards this season. They do mix it in. It's not like they It's not like they just throw it every single play all the time. The run game is still a consistent part of their deal.
Absolutely. And I think just one thing before we move on to how Texas will maybe try to be strong in this light box is to note that, like you said about this style, it's not air raid, and it's important to note that Michael Penix has been with Kalen DeBoer for 5 of his 6 years, I believe, in college. When you think about air raid, and you think about, I'm not going to, you run the ball maybe if you have to once in a while, you're basically relying on the pass to be your 5, 6, 7 yard gain at times, and living with, but this isn't that. This is downfield passing. This is going for the kill. And this is using the run as a changeup, not necessarily, just trying to use the pass as your short yardage. Am I off on that, or does that make sense?
Yeah. It's maybe a little more akin to like Colt McCoy in his later years at Texas. But with Colt McCoy in Texas threw it underneath a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Washington, like you said, going for the kill.
We'll move on to how there are personnel within that light box that helps Texas' chances in this contest. But before we get there, we got to thank our sponsor, Andre the Lawyer, longtime part of Inside Texas. Andre the Lawyer never takes more than their clients. No win, no pay, and no upfront costs. His principal office is in Dallas, Texas, and he's been representing injured Longhorns throughout the Lone Star State. Every client gets a personalized text message number so they can contact the team and get direct access to their lawyer all day and night. Call Andre the Lawyer at 214-444-8808. Okay, 214-444-8808. Whether you're in a car wreck, an 18-wheeler accident, a slip and fall, an on-the-job injury, or wrongful death, call Andre the Lawyer, 214-444-8808. So Texas has been playing a light box a lot this year. And as you have written about on Inside Texas, I think you did so today, a big reason why they've been able to do that is that they've been able to deploy Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, and they have just dominated opposing offensive lines, including ones from maybe Ames, Iowa, who have decided to call them out for some reason, even though they ended up getting, Sweat got unanimous first team All-American honors. Byron Murphy's been a second team basically from anybody else who has a selection. And you've even had Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, and Justice Finkley do really well within the run game. Jet Bush, the Gas Camp Award winner, falls in there. But I want to hear you break down where exactly and how exactly Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat have just been able to crush opposing run games to where teams have to play with one hand behind their back, and just what makes that so special for a Texas defense.
So they're kind of, I think most fans, they think of a big guy like Tavondre Sweat, who's 6'4", 364 pounds. And you imagine, okay, his role is park yourself in the middle, eat blocks, get doubled all day, don't get moved, and then the linebackers make all the plays. And then Byron Murphy, he's stout and powerful, but he's also quick, and he shoots gaps a lot. And so you imagine a guy like that, he's your 3 technique. You get him one-on-one with a guard, and you let him go, blow by, fill a gap, break things up. That's not how it works at Texas. It's a little bit different. They put Tavondre Sweat in the 3 technique, which you see labeled by the 3. You're an outside shoulder of the guard. You're aligned in the B gap. It's also labeled very helpfully on this diagram. So normally, like classically, when people talk about a 3 technique defensive tackle, they mean a guy that can get into the B gap, rush the passer, cause problems, etc.
Aaron Donald. That's, person number 1 when people think of that.
Yeah. Warren Sapp, whoever comes to mind for you. The game today is a little different because of spread offenses. The way Texas plays it is Tavondre Sweat will actually line up in the 3 technique, but he'll shove the guard backwards and inside. And his goal, ideally, is to either dominate the guard to such an extent that Sweat can later break off of him and play the A or the B gap, or to shove the guard into the A gap next to the center so that the gap just ceases to exist, and then fill the B gap with his own enormous frame. And so, yeah, his stats on the year, I don't remember exactly what they are, but I think they're like somewhat modest. It was like 5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks or something like that. Maybe half a dozen batted passes. He wasn't looking to just like shoot up the field. He was playing the 3 technique, but unless it was a pass and he got a pass read, in which case he would shuck the guard and run after the quarterback. He was really clogging space, even though he was in that 3 technique position. Murphy usually lined up as a 2-eye. The I stands for the inside eye or inside shoulder. So he'd line up inside the guard with nobody over the center. And Murphy would actually play a more of a disruptive style. He's not looking, he would play off the guard. He wouldn't just try to shoot by him all the time, but he was definitely way more upfield than T'Vondre Sweat was. And the idea with his use is if he gets upfield, he's wrecking a play. Because it's hard to do much if like there's just a big defensive tackle in the A gaps immediately. So then that would tend to draw double teams, and he'd have to get low and stand his ground, and then the linebackers would be freed up. So it's a different approach at Texas that they like to use. It almost like a reversal of the normal roles. It still leads to the linebackers making most of the tackles and most of the plays. But those 2 guys would look to occupy 3 or 4 blockers between them in about 3 gaps, basically. And then it just flips the math. The problem with the light box is you're outnumbered.
Right. And to think of it this way, if Texas were playing a light box, take off one of those tight ends that are on the screen. They would probably not be utilizing that strategy against a team that had 2 tight ends on the field, especially in the blocking and then receiving dynamic. So you would have the C gap, one of them uncovered by a tight end. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gaps. If you are playing the run with 6 people, which Texas tended to do, and you have one guy take out 1.5, that means you have 5 guys there for 4.5 gaps. And that's, you are automatically in, what you were, when you were once at a disadvantage, you got to make the play. And luckily Anthony Hill, Jalen Ford, David Benda has been making those plays a lot for Texas. But just to go ahead and cut it off that way, to cut off a place where a running back can go through, you're winning and creating, you're dissipating a numbers advantage just by the play of 2 players in this situation. And then to speak to a little bit, adding Alfred Collins into the mix, if a team did come out with this front, with having 2 tight ends, 5 offensive linemen,
Bad idea,
because you're inviting Byron Murphy to probably play. He would be playing the 4-eye for the most part, right? And they'd put Sweat at true nose, and then they'd put Alfred Collins on the other 4-eye, and they would flank them with the jack. Typically that was Baron Sorrell, and the Sam, who in a lot of occasions has been Jet Bush. And then, of course, the 2 off-ball linebackers. So you're bringing 3 high-level defensive tackles, 2 who are day 1 or top 50 pick worthy, 1 who's probably mulling over whether to be something like that. You're putting them in front of your offensive line. They have to block those 3. And if they don't, that means Jalen Ford, Anthony Hill, or Baron Sorrell probably have a chance to make a play on the run. By the way, you still have 4 back there defending what could be, 2 or 3 if they decide to pass. This doesn't talk about quarterback run game as much because it's not super applicable with Washington. That is something that teams do. And if Texas faces Alabama, that's definitely going to be something that they have to think of again. But Penix, he'll scramble. He'll scramble like Quinn Ewers scrambles. And that's not a main feature of their offense. But what that entails is just that, it's classic, 6-on-6 in the box. And Texas has guys who can, with one person, can take away a gap and a half. Another who can take away a gap. You're just winning the math battle right there, which is what football is all about. Anything else on that topic before you get to how that impacts championship defense?
Let's talk championship defense, because what we're describing here is the calling card of a national champion. If you look in my in my column today, I mentioned how many interior defensive linemen were drafted from each national champion in the playoff era. And here's a hint. The answer is always at least one. Ohio State had one, and they had Joey Bosa outside too. LSU, I don't know if all these guys played a ton, but they had like 4 or 5 in 2019. Alabama always has a ton. Georgia obviously had Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, maybe a couple more that'll be drafted from those championship teams once they actually reach once they actually get to their draft eligible status. This is how teams win championships. Good teams play good run defense. Great defenses play run defense from too high. You want to be able to stop the run because you have the biggest, baddest humans on the planet. And they're creating these advantages that we just described where you can play more guys back in coverage.
Yeah, I wanted to just real quick to say what too high meant, because sometimes, just think, I can say it, too high means 2 deep safeties. Instead of rotating one down and having one come in and play the box, that kind of limits his ability to get back deep. You have too high, which means that your guys in front can take care of the business and the safeties can play the pass that Washington's going to try to use.
Yeah. This is how you win at the highest level. If you go back and watch, like in 2018 when Clemson took down Alabama, they had NFL players across the defensive line. They stayed back in too high, like Texas did against Washington in the Alamo Bowl. And Alabama, I think, ran up a bunch of yards, but they couldn't convert in the red zone, and they couldn't get any big plays over the top. And Tua Tagovailoa threw a pick 6 early in the game against a rotating too high blitz, and Clemson won the game. Like, I think if you looked at those two rosters, you'd have to say that Alabama surely had the more talented roster overall, but Clemson had the big guys, and that made all the difference. Georgia, obviously, this has been their calling card. Who else? And Alabama, obviously, as well. This is generally when Alabama's good. You know that you can look in the trenches and find enormous people causing problems for teams trying to run the ball. As of yet, no one has won the national championship in the playoff era without this advantage.
And I think, not to get too far out on a different topic, but that's why it's the dominant theme in the NFL right now on defenses. You don't see very many, deep third defenses now because the passing concepts can tear them up. And at this level, when you're in the top 4, granted, I know that the other side of the bracket plays a little bit style of ball, but the Texas side of the bracket, it's about passing and deep shots and, playing. You have to mix everything in, but you have to be able to keep numbers back so you're not killed by a 60-yard play, 50-yard play. It's a big reason why Texas was able to get into range against Oklahoma State so often. They did everything right, but they were able to hit some big, deep plays and some big chunk plays that helped put them into that position so they didn't have to work the ball down the field. Anything else on championship defense before we get out of here?
Yeah, speaking of Oklahoma State and championship defense, I was scouring the Big 12 championship film for examples to show our good readers at Inside Texas how Texas's fronts work when Sweat and Murphy are in the game. And what I found was that Oklahoma State barely ever ran the ball with their Doak Walker winning running back, Ollie Gordon, unless Sweat and Murphy were off the field. And the long 42-yard run that was the difference in the Alamo Bowl last year came when Texas had Vernon Broughton and I don't remember who played the other tackle position, but Broughton, who's improved immeasurably since, got double teamed like 5 yards off the ball. and Washington ran it in because the guy had just an enormous gap to run through. That's not happened this year. They are 2 deep, 3 deep across the defensive line. Texas does not yield moments where they put guys out there that can get steamrolled. So, be wary. These are tough teams that Texas is going to play, but the more you think about it, the more exciting it can be for the chances of Texas winning the national championship this year.
Like I say, they're all good at this level, but Texas is good too. And those two guys in the middle have been a big reason why. Ian, thank you again. Before we get out of here, I have to mention our sponsor one more time. Andre the Lawyer never takes more than his clients. No win, no pay, no upfront costs. From his principal office in Dallas, you'll get a personalized text message number so you can communicate with the team and get direct access all day and night to the team at Andre the Lawyer. Call 214-444-8808. Car wrecks, 18-wheelers, slip and fall, anything that you might need. Andre the Lawyer, 214-444-8808. Ian, this has been awesome. Always like talking X's and O's with you. I think you've got a grasp on it like nobody else in the market, and I like to set you up. A little Steve Nash to the rest of the offense, I guess to say.
Yeah, I'm Amari Stoudemire signing out.
Hitting set shots. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching Inside Texas Football, powered by Inside Texas. Make sure you check out InsideTexas.com. Like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more great content. We will see you next time.